हुई है सर।
ओके, करो संदीप, स्टार्ट।
Namaskar friends, a very good afternoon to all of you. On behalf of Vishnu Study Circle, I welcome all participants, our guest speaker, our founder convener Sri Durgadas Agarwal ji for the today's seminar. आज की जो सेमिनार है, it's a very important one, where we are going to discuss code of ethics. Code of ethics खासकर ऐसे टाइम में जब कोविड की सिचुएशन हो और बीइंग ए प्रोफेशनल हमारी जो नेचर प्रो क्लाइंट की नेचर होती है, हम ऑलवेज क्लाइंट को सर्व करना चाहते हैं। और जैसे हमारे सर कन्वेनर सर बताते रहते हैं, एक्स कन्वेनर सर, की सीए प्रोफेशन एक ऐसा प्रोफेशन है जो हमेशा क्लाइंट की भलाई चाहता है। हम चाहे सिचुएशन जैसी भी हो, हम हमेशा क्लाइंट की भलाई चाहते हैं और कई बार उस सिचुएशन में हम खुद भी मुश्किलें पड़ जाते हैं। और शायद वैसा ही कुछ समय चल रहा है अभी और आने वाले टाइम में ये चलता भी रहेगा। आज कुछ स्टडी आई थी, उसमें बता रहे थे कि ये पीरियड नवंबर तक भी जाने वाली है, नवंबर तक भी शायद एक्सटेंड हो जाएगी, आईसीएमआर की स्टडी आई थी। साथ ही साथ भैया एक ऐसा टॉपिक जो हम बहुत कम डिस्कस करना चाहते हैं, बहुत बोर होते थे, लगता था कि भैया इसके अलावा हम टैक्स का टॉपिक डिस्कस कर लें, जीएसटी कर लें, लेकिन बीइंग ए प्रोफेशनल हमें ये भूलना नहीं चाहिए कि हमारी जो प्रोफेशनल आइडेंटिटी होती है, हमारी प्रोफेशनल जो काम करने के तरीके तौर तरीके होते हैं, जो डिसिप्लिन होती है, वही कहीं ना कहीं हमें हमारे को आइडेंटिफाई करती है, हमारे को समाज में एक अलग पहचान देती है और हमारी सम्मान की रक्षा करती है। वी आर वेरी फॉर्चुनेट, आज के इस डिस्कशन में हमारे सेंट्रल काउंसिल मेंबर फ्रॉम ईस्टर्न जोन रंजीत अग्रवाल जी हैं, उनका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है सर। साथ ही साथ हमारे बीच से बहुत ही सीनियर चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट सीए चंद्रशेखर वजय जी बॉम्बे से हैं, आपका भी स्वागत है सर। चंद्रशेखर जी जो आज की जो एग्जिस्टिंग है कोड ऑफ एथिक्स उस पर डिस्कशन करेंगे। रंजीत जी, इफ आई एम नॉट रॉन्ग, रंजीत जी जो नई कोड ऑफ एथिक्स है उस पर डिस्कस करेंगे, रेलेवेंट पॉइंट डिस्कस करेंगे उस पर। बिफोर में टेकिंग मच टाइम, मैं अपने फाउंडर कन्वीनर श्री दुर्गादास अग्रवाल जी से रिक्वेस्ट करना चाहूंगा, सर आज की प्रोग्राम की रूपरेखा बताएं, फॉर्मल इंट्रोडक्शन करें और प्रोग्राम को शुरुआत करें। सर थैंक यू।
थैंक यू संदीप जी, कन्वीनर ऑफ आवर स्टडी सर्कल। रंजीत जी आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। वी आर फॉर्चुनेट कि हमको इस प्रोग्राम को करने के लिए आपका साथ मिला, क्योंकि इंस्टीट्यूट में क्या चल रहा है, और मैंने शायद इंस्टीट्यूट से गाइडलाइंस भी है कि कोड ऑफ एथिक्स पे आप साल में एक बार जरूर रखें डिस्कशन मेंबर्स के लिए। और किसी भी प्रोफेशन के लिए मेरा मानना है कि जो एथिक्स होते हैं किसी भी प्रोफेशन के, तो वो जरूर फॉलो होना चाहिए। और हमारा इंस्टीट्यूट तो इसमें बहुत नाम भी है, चाहे उसे बदनाम कह लें, लेकिन नाम बहुत है, क्योंकि हमारे मेंबर्स के अगेंस्ट में भी हमारे इंस्टीट्यूट की डिसिप्लिनरी कमेटी बहुत अच्छे एक्शन और तुरंत एक्शन लेती है। तो हम वी ऑल चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट्स मस्ट अवेयर कि हमारे जो प्रोविजंस हैं, हमारे शेड्यूल्स पार्ट 1, पार्ट 2, शेड्यूल 2 जो भी है, इनके बारे में हमको जानकारी हो, जिससे कि हम अपने प्रोफेशनल ड्यूटीज को अच्छे से डिस्चार्ज कर सकें। रंजीत जी एक वर्ड ऑफ विजडम हमको देंगे कि इंस्टीट्यूट में क्या चल रहा है और इंस्टीट्यूट की, रेगुलेटर की, गवर्नमेंट की क्या एक्सपेक्टेशंस है मेंबर्स के साथ में। और वाजे साहब, सी चंद्रशेखर वाजे जी जो वेरी सीनियर मेंबर्स हैं बॉम्बे से, वो डिटेल्ड में डेलिब्रेट करेंगे। तो मैं रंजीत जी का और वाजे साहब का बहुत बहुत स्वागत करता हूं, और जो हमारे पार्टिसिपेंट्स आ गए हैं उनका भी बहुत बहुत स्वागत। और पार्टिसिपेंट से रिक्वेस्ट भी है, जो भी उनके कोई क्वेश्चंस हैं, कोई क्वेरी हैं, तो क्वेश्चन आंसर में या चैट में अपने डाल दें, जिससे कि आपका सूटेबल टाइम पे वाजे साहब उसको एड्रेस कर सकें और रंजीत जी उसको एंडोर्स कर सकें। तो इन शब्दों के साथ मैं बहुत स्वागत करते हुए सबसे पहले रंजीत अग्रवाल जी को, अपर सेंट्रल काउंसिल मेंबर, उनको बुलाना चाहूंगा कि वो अपना वर्ड ऑफ विजडम हम लोगों के सामने रखें। वेलकम रंजीत अग्रवाल जी।
Thank you, Durgadas ji. Very kind of you for calling us and get us deliberate on this very important and pertinent topic of code of ethics. Sandeep Sharma ji and my very senior not council caliber, senior member of this profession, Vajay sir from Mumbai, and he's the person who has a vast experience on code of ethics, and since a long time he's associated with the Ethical Standard Board, and many times he has written our code of ethics 2009 also, contributed a lot in that part also. So welcome Chandrasekhar Vajay sir and all the viewers. As rightly said by Sharma ji and Durga Das ji Agrawal, that this is the subject which is rarely people want to know. When we qualified as a CA, we got the 3 green color books, and we rarely open those books. Whenever problem comes, then we go through those books. So this is the hard facts, but the kind of regulation is coming, the kind of complex practice we are going into, the knowing the code of ethics is very, very important, and we cannot like afford to not to know the code of ethics. If you want to know the importance of code of ethics, you must go through the NFRA order given in the context of ILFS, and that order is in the public domain. How they have dealt with the international code of ethics, national code of ethics, how these code of ethics are important more than the ICI Act and accounting and auditing standards. They have very in detail, they have described in that order. So everybody must go. So when these code of ethics or other issue comes, some problem comes, then we go hither and thither. But we must know, like when I got the mail from the study circle, they have put the logo of ICI in that study circle, which is not allowed. So you might not be aware. I'm not saying that you have done intensely. You might not be aware. So by going through the code of ethics, then you will know what is allowed. What it does not mean that our members are not want to follow. They may not be aware. So to make them aware, this is the session we are taking. So within 40-45 minutes, I will go through the nitty-gritty of what are the new code of ethics is coming, and in context of that, what are the existing codes. So let me share my PPT. You have to make me co-host to share the PPT.
आपका चल सकता है, आप चलाइए रंजीत.
No, I think
नहीं आ
I
रहा.
have to be co-host to share my PPT.
ऐसा क्या? विनीत जरा थोड़ा देखो भाई.
जी सर.
I cannot share until I am
रंजीत जी को पीपीटी शेयर करने का है, थोड़ा देखो उनको को होस्ट बनाना पड़ेगा क्या?
ट्राई करिए सर, प्लीज ट्राई करिए एक बार.
No, it is saying that you cannot share the PPT.
आप एक बार ट्राई करिए.
Yes, now it's coming. Hope it is visible now. This PPT is visible.
Very clear, very clear.
Okay, so friends, let us start with this code of ethics. As you might be aware, a member of the institute, where in practice or a industry or a business, if he is a member, he must go through all the provisions of the CA Act, CA regulation, accounting standard, auditing standard, various guidance note, technical guide, council guideline, and the most important council guideline is the code of ethics. So when this code of conduct, which was, although code of conduct is not a new thing for we Indian, since Mahabharata and Ramayana days, we are following the code of ethics. When we become the professional, then also code of ethics is still there. But in 1963, the institute thought that some code of conduct should be codified, formulated in a writing in black and white, so that the member can have the ease in following them. So in 1963, when our president was CA R.C. Cooper sir, he has started this code of ethics. So that he said that in the larger interest of the institute, the council exhorts all members to search their hearts and concise whenever in doubt, and thereby towards the maintenance of high principles of professional conduct established by this council. So they must go through this code of ethics. As it is said, code of ethics is a state of mind, and in our code of ethics it is written that whenever you have confronted with the two views, something is legal but not ethical, then our code of ethics says we must not follow if it is not ethical, even though it is legal. Code ethics is lawful, but it's a very awful. And the most important part of the code of ethics is that we are the professionals, and whenever we discharge our duty as a professional, the personal interest, personal gain is secondary, and the primary focus of our attest function or other function is the national interest, the stakeholders interest, various regulators interest, society interest. So this code of ethics makes we as a citizen of this country a professional. Those who are following the code of ethics with some integrity are called professional, and that's why chartered accountant or other professionals are not working for personal gain, but paramount importance given to the national interest. That's why we are called professional, and code of ethics makes a play important role in that distinction. 1963, as I told you, this code of ethics, which was called code of conduct, in the first time it was introduced in the council, and then in 2001 it was revised, the name was revised, it was said code of ethics. And in 2009, this is the code of ethics we have right now, is the first time international code of ethics. We have the Ethical Standard Board of Accountant, International Ethical Standard Board of Accountant in IFAC, which is like our Ethical Standard Board of ICI. And that IFAC has 130 country accounting body as a member, and ICI one of the founder member of the IFAC. So whatever they pronounce or whatever guidance they give, we as a member have to follow. But since 2005, we have not aligned our code of ethics with that international code of ethics. So in 2009, 2005, their updates we have aligned with our code of ethics. And in last year, 2019, after 2005, 2018, till 2018, international code of ethics has been aligned with the ICI code of ethics. So it has happened after a gap of 12, 13 years. But when you go through this, our code of ethics, in some context, our code of ethics are more stringent than international code of ethics. Like in our India, statutory auditor cannot become the internal auditor. We cannot charge fees on the contingent fees are not allowed with some exceptions. We cannot charge fees based on the percentage with some exceptions. We have our management consultancy service guideline. We have our advertisement guideline. We have our website guideline. So all these guidelines are not there in international code of ethics. So globally, our code of ethics are in some context are more stringent than international code of ethics. And what is the penal provision if you are not following the code of ethics? As I told you, code of ethics is a council guideline, and we have part 2, clause 2, PA plot 2, clause 2, clause 1, which talks about that non-adherence to the institute council guideline is a professional misconduct. So if you are not following the code of ethics pronounced by the council is a professional misconduct in schedule 2, part 2, clause 1. Globally, as I told you, all 130, 140 accounting body globally, the code of ethics are based on the 5 fundamental principles, that are integrity, objectivity, professional competence and due care, confidentiality, and professional behavior. These are the 5 pillars of this code of ethics, and we have our schedule 1, schedule 2. Whatever clauses we are there are basically based on these 5 fundamental principles. We have to follow these 5 principles while discharging our duty as a member of this profession. Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 are, we have Schedule 1, there are 4 parts which talks about various members in practice, service generally, and other guidelines. We have Schedule 2, they have 3 parts. So the fundamental difference between Schedule 1, a detailed discussion will be taken by Vajay sir. I'm just giving you overview. Schedule 1 has 19 clauses, and we have a section 21 which talks about institute has the power to constitute board of discipline, a committee in which 3 members are the member, in which 2 are the council member and 1 nominated by the government. So these 3 members bench, as per schedule 1 and section 21, they deal with the non-compliances done by our member, which like we have not communicated with our previous auditor, you have shared the fees with your non-member, or you have solicited, you have done some advertisement violation, or we have communication charge the fees on the percentage. All these non-compliances which are affecting the members internally within the fraternity are covered in schedule 1, and non-compliance of any of these clauses, 19 clauses in schedule 1, based on the wisdom of this board of discipline, 3 types of penal provisions are there. Either they can reprimand you, they can remove your name from register of member for maximum 3 months, or 1 lakh, maximum 1 lakh rupees monetary penalty. Either one or cumulative all 3, depending on the judgment of the BOD. Then we have schedule 2, which talks about all the 15 clauses where the non-compliances which are affecting the not fraternity at large but the outsider stakeholders, government, regulators, if they are affected because of our non-compliance, these type of non-compliance are covered in schedule 2. Like we have not discharged our duty ethically, we are grossly negligent, material departure while the reporting we have not covered, we have done some false reporting while doing discharging the audit function. All these issues which are affecting the country as a whole, society as a whole, are covered in schedule 2, and that's why the repercussion, there are 3 types of penal provision again in this schedule 2. Either they can reprimand, they can permanently remove your name from register of member. In the past twice it has happened, and maximum 5 lakh rupees penal provision. So who takes this call? As per section 21B again, the Act empower us to constitute a disciplinary committee, and this is the larger bench than schedule 1. It has 5-member bench, 3 are council member and 2 are government nominee. So all these 5-member bench decides the non-compliance done by members in schedule 2 in all these 15 clauses, and 3 types of penal provisions are mentioned. So these are the basically fundamental difference between schedule 1 and schedule 2, which Vajay sir will detail discussion when he will deliberate. Now we will discuss 5 kinds of threats. In our code of ethics, we have mentioned that there are 5 kinds of threat which are affecting our profession, like self-interest threat, self-review threat, advocacy threat, familiarity threat, and intimidation threat. We will discuss one by one all these threats. Suppose in a tender document, you are quoting a low fees in which you yourself are aware that you are not able to justify with the compliance of the various accounting auditing standard while discharging duty in that tender. So that amount you are quoting, you are aware it is not material, and you cannot do justice. So this kind of quoting of low fees is a self-interest threat. You have a close relationship with your client, 30, 20, 40 years, and you and the client family, your family are going together on the holiday, all these things. So this is also an example of self-interest threat, because when you are so much closely associated with the client, how can you independent view on the working of the client? If you have taken some joint property with the client, this is also example of self-interest threat. You have given loan or taken loan from your client for which you are doing the audit function, is also example of self-interest threat. There are self-review threats which talks about that suppose you have developed some system for your client, and now you are auditing the report generated by the same system. This is the example of self-review threat. So one hand you have developed some system and the system generated some report, and now you are the auditor of the same reports developed by generated by that system. So this is also a case of self-review threat. Then we have advocacy threat. A particular clause or a section or a paragraph of a act might be affecting your client's working, and now you are advocating to the government, to the legislator to remove that section clause. This is the example of advocacy threat. When a institute or a association or a body represent, that is a different part. But when you as a auditor are representing your client to the government to remove some sections or clauses, this is the examples of advocacy threat. There are so many other examples like acting as an advocate for client in litigation or dispute with third party. This is also the examples of advocacy threat. Familiarity threat, like a spouse of a chartered accountant is a CEO or in a higher position which are influencing the decision of that company, and you are the auditor of that company. This is the example of familiarity threat. Your ex-partner, your immediate ex-partner or 2-3-year-old partner have resigned from your firm and joined a company in a senior position in which decision-making powers are there. And now you want to do the audit of that company. This is also a case of familiarity threat. You, Holi, Deepavali, birthday, anniversary, you are accepting the gifts from your client of substantial amount. And these amounts, if the substantial is there, these are the very, very common examples of familiarity threat. Long association, I told you, also a case of familiarity threat. And the last threat is intimidation threat. Suppose on the Holi, Deepavali or birthday and anniversary, you have taken some gift from the client, the amount is substantial. And now the client is intimating that if you qualify my report, then I will make it public that you have accepted some gift from me. So this is the case of intimidation. The client is pressurizing you not to qualify the report because you have accepted some gift from him. In bank audit or other audit, the manager or the general manager are like pressurizing, don't do this account NPA or that account NPA, you will not get the work, this, that. These are the cases of intimidation threat. There are many clients who say, if you qualify my report, then I will not give you other works as permitted by the institute. These are the some of the examples of the intimidation threat. So what are the safeguards? The Institute Code of Ethics says, in all these situations, these are the 5 kinds of examples. In all these situations, the primary objective of these things is to reduce this threat to an acceptable level so that the threats can be reduced and then you can continue. If you are not able to reduce this threat to acceptable level, then you have to withdraw. You have to withdraw from the assignment. These are the safeguards given our code of ethics. They also talks about you can take the expert opinion, take the institute view, all these things. But in any case, you have to bring these threats to the acceptable level. Otherwise, you are like, suppose you have been invited as a to attend the board meeting of a company in Goa, and you want to take your spouse along with you, and the expenditure of your spouse, traveling and airfare, hotel, all these are paid by the company. Then this is the threats. How to remove this threat? How to remove this threat to the acceptable level? You pay the expenditure of spouse. When you are paying the expenditure of spouse, not the client, then very well you can take along your spouse with the in that board meeting in Goa. So these are some of the examples how to reduce this threat. Like we will discuss SQC1, 7+2 is there. Then we will also discuss this point. Now we will discuss this rotation. As you are saying, as you are aware, we have section 139(2) of the Companies Act, which talks about 5-year and 10 years rotation of the firm and the individual partners. Then we have the rotation of partner as per Banking Companies Act, Central Statutory Auditor, Branch Auditor. These limits are there. Then we have rotation by the Housing Finance Company, by Housing Finance Board. This National Housing Board prescribe so much of cooling is required while doing the audit of housing finance company. SEBI has also prescribed some cooling for doing the audit of a stockbroker and mutual funds. Employees State Provident Fund Scheme 52 also talks about some of the cooling off in the audit of that schemes. We have SQC1. Now SQC1 talks about standard of quality control, which has been released by the ICAI in 2009, which says if you are an auditor of a listed company, then 7 years, if you are doing that audit of that listed company for 7 consecutive years or cumulative, then 2 years cooling is required. After 7 years, you cannot do that audit of that company for next 2 years. From 10th year, you can start the audit. So what is the way out? Should you resign from that company after 7 years? No. The SQC one says, in that case, the partner who was doing the 7 years audit since last 7 years should not be appointed as a engagement partner or an audit partner for 8th and 9th year. The another partner of your firm should be appointed for 8th and 9th year, and that partner can come back from the 10th year onwards. So these are the way out how to reduce the threat to the acceptable level. So resignation or withdrawing is not a solution. You can depute your another partner as the audit partner instead of the partner who was doing. In the case of proprietor or individual, this SQC one is not applicable. That's why the question may come what to do about the proprietorship concern. So in those cases, these are not concerned. But if you are a proprietor or a individual partner are doing the listed company audit, then your peer review done by the ICI is must. Without peer review, you cannot do the listed company audit. This is the regulation of the SEBI. Then we have a guidance note which talks about the statutory auditor of an entity cannot be his internal auditor. In the case of a auditor being appointed by the CAG or RBI or any government agency, and you are the statutory auditor, so this guidance note of our ICI says for next 1 year, immediate next 1 year, you cannot do any non-audit function of that entity. Meaning thereby, if you are a statutory auditor appointed by the government, SEBI, RBI, so the next year when you have demitted a statutory auditor, you cannot do any non-audit function of that company. But vice versa is allowed. If you are the internal auditor, then the next year you can be the statutory auditor. Now we will discuss some of the very 2-3 important points which has come in our code of ethics, which are going to be applicable from 1st of July 2020. The most important aspect of this new code of ethics is administrative service. As you are aware, being a auditor of a company, you are also doing some taxation work which was allowed. But nowhere it is in writing that being a auditor of a company, you can also do the filing of the various form, routine work or normal course of operation in which professional judgment is there, like ROC return, income tax return, GST return, TDS return. All these kinds of filing of return were also permitted to the auditor of entity in this new code of ethics, which we have permitted in writing. Like it was not earlier in 2009 code, but now it is very much clear that all these routine work, normal course of operation where professional judgment is not required, you can very well do while doing the audit of your entity. So this is the welcome step as far as small and medium practitioners are concerned. Now they can very well do all these work in addition to the audit of that client. Taxation service, some changes have come in this new code of ethics. Like if you are a auditor of a public interest entity, they have coined a new word PIE, public interest entity, which is literally a listed company. So if you are an auditor of a PIE, public entity, so valuation work, taxation service of that entity, a auditor is not permitted. This is the new parameter has been come in this new taxation service, which are going to be effective from 1st of July. So only PIE, some restrictions are there. For non-PIE, whatever you are doing usually, you are permitted to go for that. Fees, this is again a debatable issue. We are reconsidering this point in our council that if in the last 2 consecutive years, if one client fees of your total fees exceeding more than 15% from single client, then you have to disclose these facts to those management or those charged with the government. Meaning thereby, if your total fees, if one client fees is exceeding 15% of the total fees of your firm, then that aspect you have to disclose to the management that your fees is exceeding 15% of my total fees, like this. Although some exemptions are there, if this restriction is not applicable for 5 lakh rupees, audit of the government company, PSU company, bank company, FI financial institution, or any auditor appointed by the government. But this 15% clause, it is again in the reconsideration, and something, some decision may come. So I am giving some disclaimer. This 15% is right now from 1st July, but some changes may come. NOCLAR, we have SA 250, which talks about the laws and regulation in audit of the financial statement. Already this standard is there from 1/4/2009. In addition to that, a new concept has come which talks about non-compliance with laws and regulation, which says if you are a auditor of a public interest entity, which is again a listed company, and in course of the audit, if you come across some non-compliance in which your scope of the audit or engagement letter does not specify, but still you have come across in course of audit that some non-compliance has happened in those area, then these facts has to be brought to the notice of the management. Like a example are giving, like some fraud has happened, corruption, bribery, money laundering, some environmental non-compliances, or some insider trading or terrorist financing. All these examples they have given. If you come across any of the non-compliance of these issues, then these facts has to be brought to the notice of the management. This is applicable to listed entity initially from this year, 1/4/2020, 1/7/2020. Later on it may be for others, but right now it is restricted to public interest entity. Then it's we talk about documentation. In January 2017, the institute already come out with the KYC, know your client, in which the first paper of your working file, audit file or working paper file, should have the details, some parameters we have specified. The content of that letter says that these are the things which about the client must be there in the first page of your working file: name of the client, address, detail, all these things. Because 5 years, 10 years down the line, you may not be the auditor of that entity or the client, and after 10 years the client have some done wrong to the company or some fraud happen, then the inquiry may also come to you. So the KYC, know your client, is a mandatory. After 10 years you cannot say I don't know that client, still you have already audited that last 10 years of that client. So knowing the client is mandatory. So that's why January 2017 it has come by the ICI. In this new code of ethics, a detailed documentation has been prescribed for each and every activity. You will see this part 1 of this code of ethics. Every paragraph, at the end of that, a small paragraph is there regarding documentation. In our case, we don't give much importance to documentation. In bigger firm or some medium-sized firm, they do give, but SME proprietorship or a small firm don't give much importance to documentation. That's why they have said that a detailed documentation is required to be made while doing the test function of any entity. The facts, the accounting standard applicable to that entity, what communication you have made with the entity, what redressal mechanism you have adopted after communicating with the entity, and how this accountant, the chartered accountant, attempted to resolve the issues of that entity. All these facts and figures are mandatory, required to be documented properly in detail. This is the new concept in our new code of ethics. 1 or 2 important points related to this resignation of auditor. A new paragraph we have added in our new code of ethics. Clause 8, part 1, schedule 1 talks about communication with the previous auditor. So now if a chartered accountant has resigned from a company and you have been appointed a new auditor, and now you are writing to the previous auditor about the non-compliance, any non-compliance known to the previous auditor, and if you are putting this in writing to the previous auditor, then the previous auditor is mandatorily required to supply this information to the incoming auditor. That's why we have seen the retiring auditor shall provide the information diligently if he happens to be aware of the non-compliance, and the incoming auditor writes to the previous auditor in writing to please tell me about the non-compliance in this company. So earlier this provision was not there. This has come because of the various resignation happening in recent times, and to plug these loopholes, the institute also thought कि make it also mandatory. The non-compliance by the previous auditor should be known to the incoming auditor if he desires. As far as communication with the previous auditor, we have also made a provision that through registered email ID or official email ID, if you want to communicate with the previous auditor and the previous auditor responds on that mail, then that will be considered as a valid communication. So this email communication we have also recognized in addition to the registered AD. And now we are also working on communication with the previous auditor through UDIN portal. Although council has decided to go further, but the guideline in this regard under preparation. So we are in the process ki how a chartered accountant can communicate with the previous auditor through UDIN portal also to plug the time gap, to all these things we are having. So this is the new provision in this new code of ethics for resignation of auditor. You must keep in mind. We have also drastically changed the advertisement guideline. Since 2009 code, the advertisement guideline has come a sea change in our 2019 code of ethics. Earlier, when 2009 code of ethics started, social media was not so active that point of time. Now we have considered the importance of social media in our new code of ethics. So whenever you are having a debate in the TV debate or Facebook debate or WhatsApp debate or any debate, and which or a seminar presentation, like I am presenting with the name Ranjit Agarwal in this slide, I have not written my firm name. But now from 1st July, the mentioning of firm name we have permitted. So now you can also mention your firm name in addition to your individual name. You can also have your YouTube channel, but YouTube channel to disseminate the various information, topic, seminar is okay. But YouTube channel has to be in individual CA name, not in firm name. And there are two types of method, push method and pull method. So you cannot give a information about your YouTube channel to various social media, please come and see my channel. Or you cannot invite the people as a push method to come and see. You can have your YouTube channel and those who want to see, they can come and see, that's fine. But you cannot propagate your YouTube channel on the various advertisement mechanism. Social media aggregator, directory guideline, all these things are already there. We have not made much change. Visiting card, photographs of on your visiting card was already also not permissible. Now, in addition to your name, firm name, and your CF firms, branch office, whatever you are supposed to mention your visiting card, diploma course done by ICI were allowed, like DISA or a international taxation, but certification course done from ICI were not permitted to mention in the visiting card or other stationery. But two more addition we have allowed. If you are a practicing CA and you are also insolvency professional or you are a registered valuer, then insolvency professional and registered valuer can also be mentioned in your visiting card or stationery. If you want to sponsor any event as a CSR activity, anything, firm cannot put their name, individual CA name can be mentioned while doing the CSR activity. This is the new decision we have taken as far as CSR is concerned. The last 2-3 points I would like to mention. We have our corporate form of practice, which most of our members may or may not be aware. Like you can be a independent director or director simpliciter in any company, but can you be the managing director, whole-time director? No. But this 2006 guideline by ICI says if you want to be the managing director, whole-time director, the very well you can be, but these are the provision of the corporate form of practice. What are the provision of this corporate form of practice? In addition to your firm, you can also form a company. The name approval of that company will be given by the ICI on the same line as per regulation 190 of the name approval of the firms the institute gives. After taking the name approval, the object clause of that company will be to deal with the management consultancy service as per section 224 of the CA Act. So there are 27, 28 management consultancy service are prescribed there, which you can deal with in that company. And that is the only one line object clause is there. And you can also put these services there also. all the director of that company has to be practicing chartered accountant. The practicing CA can be from your firm, from others firm, no matter, but they have to be practicing CA, all the director. And the shareholder of that company will be the director and their relatives. So if you satisfy all these 4 conditions, you can very well form a company as per ICAI guideline, and then you can register with the ROC. And in addition to your firm name, you can very well mention in your stationery everything, partner so and so and director, managing director of XYZ Private Limited. And these corporate form of practice will deal with only management consultancy service. They cannot do the audit, and of course not of the same client of you are doing the audit. For non-audit client, all the management consultancy service these firms can, this company can do, like insolvency work you can do valuation work, forensic audit, all these kinds of work are permitted to be done in this company. Tender guideline, already it is there. In 2016, we have come out with a tender guideline in which those services which are statutorily done by only chartered accountant, in those services, if the minimum fees is not there, you cannot respond to those services. But there are many services which are in addition to CA, others can also do. Internal audit, stock audit, so many services non-CA can also do. So in those tender, if the non-CA can also participate, then minimum fees restriction is not required. And now in this new code of ethics, since minimum fees where this clause were many regulator and the government agency, they have manipulating this minimum fees. They are putting 1 rupee, 5 rupees, 100 rupees as a minimum fee. So we have changed one line that the minimum fees has to be commensurate with the size, volume, manpower requirement, and number of days work. All these things we have put so that they are nothing, anything they should not put. They should put the minimum fees based on the work they are expecting from the chartered accountant. And the last point is a multidisciplinary partnership. In 2006, we have already enabled a regulation 53A and B of the CA regulation, which talks that a chartered accountant in practice can partner with 7 kind of professional: CA, CS, cost, advocate, architect. These 7 types of professionals were enlisted in our regulation. But unfortunately, these 6 other professional body are not amending their regulation, and that's why these things are not notifying. So right now our regulation said multidisciplinary partnership is allowed. But since other professionals are not allowing, so these things are not coming on the ground. So, but we feel because of this various complex practice, these things are happening. Multidisciplinary is the need of the hour, but our regulation also is enabling provision. But others institute regulation does not permit. That's why these things are not happening. And the last point is the section 22, which talks about the other misconduct. So being a chartered accountant, a professionalism is accepted from a person if you are a professional, that in addition to your professional duty, audit and attest function, if you are not behaving professionally in other matters also, then we have section 22, which says ki in other misconduct also you can be disciplinary proceeding can be initiated, like you are forging the will of your relative or any other incident, you are not following the guideline of the Ministry of Health Affairs, lockdown guideline. In social media, you are not professionally behaving. All these things are the examples of other misconduct as per our CA Act. So these are the some of the thoughts of this code of ethics, and we have 2-3 important provision in our new code of ethics, which I talks about the administrative service 15% fees, no clause, resignation of auditor, change of the advertisement guideline, documentations part. All these new concept has come in addition to what was there earlier. So with these words, I put my words rest here, and I request Vajay sir, since he has to leave by 6 also, so I will listen to Vajay sir for his detailed deliberation on all these schedule 1 and schedule 2. With these words, thank you very much for your patience listening.
Thank you, Ranjit ji. वंडरफुल, क्रिस्प एंड क्रंची। मतलब आपने 40-45 मिनट के अंदर बहुत सारा हमको एक बेसिक बैकग्राउंड दे दिया और इंस्टीट्यूट क्या क्या इनिशिएटिव ले रहा है ये आपने बताया। और मैं संदीप जी से थोड़ा चाहूंगा कि वजह सर का थोड़ा सा और एलेबोरेट, थोड़ा सा लोगों को इंट्रोडक्शन अगर आपके पास हो तो दें। वैसे हम तो जानते हैं कि ही इज वेरी सीनियर प्रोफेशनल एंड डिसिप्लिनरी जो मैकेनिज्म में उनका बड़ा कंट्रीब्यूशन रहा इंस्टीट्यूट के लिए। अगर आपके पास कुछ और हो तो संदीप जरा थोड़ा बताएं। नहीं तो रंजीत जी आप थोड़ा सा और एलेबोरेट कर दें, उनको थोड़ा कम ही जानते होंगे तो थोड़ा।
रंजीत जी अगर करें तो आई थिंक इट वुड
हाँ,
बी
यस यस, संदीप प्लीज यू।
Vajay sir is a very senior member. I think more than 40 years of experience he has. He's from Mumbai, and he has contributed a lot in our ethical boards in framing the code of ethics, and many times he was associated. And this time also in our faculty development program in Delhi, I have taken his services to train our member to be the faculty in ethical board. So with these backgrounds, I request Vajay sir to please deliberate on the subject.
Thanks.
Welcome, Vijay sir.
Yeah. I just share the screen. Namaskar and good evening to all of you. Mr. Ranjit Agarwal. Now, is it visible? Is the screen visible?
Yes, visible.
Very fine, sir.
Yeah. Mr. Ranjit Agarwal, Mr. Durgadas ji, Mr. Sandeep Sharma, and all the viewers, a very good evening to you. In fact, it is always a challenge to speak after it because it's the subject so perfectly and excellently that it is really challenging to speak after him. I must compliment this study circle for two important things. One is that for starting the session right in time and also not spending much time on introductions, and also that the speakers can do full justice to their topics. So I'll straight away go to the topic. In fact, Ranjit ji was very kind enough, or he has always been kind enough to recommend my name as a co-speaker so that I myself get enriched in that process. Well, friends, I have about 1 hour's time, and in that most of the preliminary part Ranjit ji has very ably dealt with, but still I'll be spending about 5 to 7 minutes on the philosophical part, the basic background of this ethics, then about 10 to 15 minutes on the little disciplinary mechanism as to how it works, certain principles that have been evolved, and then I'll also deal with the important clauses of Schedule 1 and 2, a few of which Ranjit ji has already tackled. So, friends, as in the introduction also it was mentioned, and Ranjit ji also mentioned that the code of ethics, which we have so far not been giving that much of importance that it deserves, but now the times are changing, and therefore we should be very much aware as to what we are expected to do, because ethics is the foundation, because credibility is the foundation of our profession. Many people complain that this ethics is only a burden on us, which is not so, friends, because ultimately I'll explain to you why it is important. The motto of our institute is Ya Esha Sukteshu Jagrati. That means he who is awake when the entire world around is asleep. And this was suggested to us, recommended to us by Maharshi Aurobindo when our institute was formed. And this describes the chartered accountant and compares it with Atman or Brahman, which is the ultimate truth. And ultimately, as when we do a test function, we are intimately connected with what is true and fair. Then, friends, the introductory part of these ethical principles is that, as you know, it is nothing but a set of moral values, and we have inherited it from ancient centuries or rather thousands of years ago in our ancient India, in all those scriptures, the ethics was given a lot of prominence. In fact, recently, if we have seen the serials of Ramayana and Mahabharata, even wars were fought with ethical principles. So, ethics means moral values and it is accountability to one's own conscience. And code of ethics is not purely philosophical, but what I will be dealing with is the practical experiences which I have come across in the process of dealing or pleading the disciplinary cases before the disciplinary committee and the council and the appellate authority. So that I try to make it as lively as possible and I will not be speaking only the theory. But when friends, we always expect that we need to be independent, then we must keep in mind that eternal vigilance is the cost of independence. If you need to be or if you want to be independent, then you have to be eternally vigilant. Just as the borders of our country, if you want to maintain our independence, then we have to be vigilant on the borders and our Jawans and our army is all set to do that. That is why we are living so peacefully in our social and civil life. And in the field of ethics, one important thought that even thinking of violating somebody else's rights is unethical. And in the field of ethics, one is either ethical or unethical. There is no in-between stage. So you cannot say by and large I am ethical. When you say by and large you are ethical, that means at occasions you always compromise on your ethics. Now what is the need of these ethics? The need is that, as I mentioned, the credibility is the foundation of any profession and particularly our profession, because our signature commands value. Our image commands value. The fact that this has come from a chartered accountant immediately is given more weightage and credibility or acceptability. But the society's expectations are also, we must note. Our society, the members of the society complain that our institute is very lenient towards members. Our institute takes a lot of time in disposing of the complaints and the punishments awarded are very mild. That means the society expects that the code should be implemented or enforced very strictly, and that is why, as Ranjitji rightly said, that now we need to be more conscious and more aware of what are the principles of ethics which are internationally recognized, which have been adopted by our institute. Rather, as he rightly mentioned, our code is much stricter than the other countries' codes, and therefore we should be really proud the manner in which our institute implements this. Because this ultimately we must always keep in mind that this is for our own interest. It is a shield to protect us and not a burden for us. Why so? Because if there is something which goes wrong, if you can prove that you have followed the ethics properly, then no harm can be caused to you. So that is why ethics becomes your shield. Many people complain that why we alone have to maintain the ethics. बाकी की दुनिया जो चाहे वो करती है, उनको कोई पूछने वाला नहीं है. हमारे माथे पे ये burden क्यों है? And let other people behave properly, then only we will start behaving properly. So this question was put to Swami Vivekananda, and he said that if at all you think like this, because you are intellectuals, you are supposed to be the leaders of the society. You cannot say I will follow the society, because society is ultimately a mob psychology. If you want to be intellectuals and you want to be independent, then you should lead the society as a guide. And if you wait for the society or the other people to behave properly, that means as if you are standing on one bank of the river and saying that I will cross the river only when the water flows away. So this is not practicable, and therefore there is no alternative but to follow our ethics. Now, what is the source of ethics? Source of another code of ethics. The code of ethics is not something fallen from the heaven. In our country, it was there thousands of years ago, and those are all practical and relevant even today. So ethics, as you know, it is as old as human civilization. And in our Taittiriya Upanishad, for our this motto, Yuva Yeshu Sukteshu Jagati, was adopted from Kathopanishad. Whereas these principles which I am talking on, which our ethics are based, is Taittiriya Upanishad, in which there are three main messages which are given to all the students. So, for example, when we pass out our CA, just as in the olden days, when the students used to complete their 12 years training in the ashrama with a sage or a rishi, then they used to get three messages. And those three messages are Satyam vada, speak the truth. Dharmam chara. What is dharmam? Dharmam is your duty. Perform your duty religiously. That is, dharmam is not something like puja or upasana, worship, but it is dharmam is your duty. So duty you discharge very religiously. And third is very important. Swadhyayan ma pramadha. That means do not commit any default in your self study. That is continuous study. And this code of this CPE is nothing but this last principle, Swadhyayan ma pramadha. This means continuing professional education. So once you qualify, that is not the end of your studies, but that is the beginning of your studies, because in your day-to-day practice, you have to come across so many academic challenges and practical challenges that you constantly need to be updated. That is why new laws are coming, company law, GST, everything is new, and then we need to be updated, because otherwise we will suffer and our clients also will suffer. And what is the present image, friends? The present image is that we are not assertive enough. We are too accommodative. We always work in the interest of the client and invite trouble in the process. Credibility and responsibility, or rather respectability, is diminishing. Many people do not give us respect that we deserve because they brand us, and that is see the next point. There was checklist in one very reputed organizations for giving some licenses or giving some permissions, and there the last line was like this: please avoid bringing chartered accountant certificates as the same are often found unreliable. Whatever I am presenting is ultimately I am leaving it to your own introspection, because it is ultimately the process of introspection for all of us. So please, whatever I will be talking and sharing with you is my experiences, which are very eye-openers. And now I'll first come to the first case that I always start, or rather begin my presentation on good faith. See, we act too much on good faith. Good faith, ultimately, what is the major principle that we have to keep in mind is the professional skepticism. What is professional skepticism? It does not mean that you suspect everything, but don't accept anything at face value. So this is professional skepticism. I'll share with you one or two instances of how we act and how we invite trouble for ourselves. See, friends, there was husband and wife, both were chartered accountants, and they were doing some cooperative societies audit, housing society, small housing society. The wife did the audit for 3 years, and in the cooperative sector, as you know, the principle of rotation is there for many years. In the Companies Act, it is coming now, but otherwise in societies it was there. After 3 years, the husband did the audit, and in the next 2-3 years, that is 8th or 9th year, there were divorce petition between the two, and the wife filed a complaint against her husband, saying that he took the audit without communicating with the previous auditor. That means to herself. Now, friends, see, no relations in this Kali Yuga are permanent. That means many people are boasting that we have a very close relationship with the client, and in fact, as Ranjit ji mentioned, it actually gives rise to the familiarity threat. So this familiarity threat should not be there, but many chartered accountants boast that I am so close to this particular client that he treats me like his family member. I always tell him that please don't go so intimate or close to the client, and if you want to really test whether the relationship is so pakka, then raise your fees once and then try to understand whether you are really so close and you are really as a family member. Another very concrete example of good faith I will give, because these are the things which are inviting trouble for many of us. The second example is also really very nightmarish and eye-opening. There was a chartered accountant who was doing the tax audit of a gentleman, of a client, and his client's daughter comes to this chartered accountant's office and requests the chartered accountant to give the income tax return attested, copies of income tax return attested in respect of her husband and mother-in-law. Now this chartered accountant generally inquired as to why it is required, and usually you know these ITRs are required for visa purposes or some passport purposes or some bank loan or something. So she told something like that reason, and he accepted it in good faith, and he verified, because he was himself handling the tax returns of the entire family. So he did it, verified it carefully, and also gave the proper certificate. Within 1 month's time, he received a complaint from the husband of that lady, asking him as to how he parted with his tax documents to his wife without his written authority. Now, please imagine, friends, the husband is saying that the chartered accountant should not part with the tax documents with his spouse. Because why did it happen like that? Because the wife had filed a suit in a court of law for domestic violence against the husband. Now, you will wonder as to what then normally we should do. Now, in this particular case, I asked that particular chartered accountant, was that lady normally visiting your office for any tax or other work? He said, no, she came for the first time. He said that should trigger the something fishy, some suspicion in your mind as to on all these years, this lady has never come to my office and asked anything. Always either her husband comes or her father comes. Then why today she has come? So see, this is the thing that is why what is called it as professional skepticism. There could be other factors also. He could call just a friendly call to the gentleman and just confirm whether he should hand over it or not. So friends, now this is coming out of experience, because ultimately this is Kali Yuga and we take many things for granted. Hello, this is not working in the Kali Yuga because the times are changing. So what is now observed is weak documentation. As was rightly mentioned in the previous presentation, our documentation is so weak because these normally SME firms, I'm aware that I'm addressing, my focus is the audience is majoritarily SME firms and not the big firms, where the documentation is given more important than the actual quality of work. But here we slog, but we don't document. So here we should always keep in mind that work should not only be done, but it should be seen that it is done. And next sentence is also very important. Faintest of ink is stronger than the strongest of memories. Now, we lack proactiveness. That is why we are always latecomers. We always wake up at the 11th hour. And therefore, we always have to beg to the government for extension of time for filing of return. Because we don't start in a proactive manner. And moreover, we should also remember that we cannot rather stand up and rather we cannot be assertive against the government, because our bread and butter, our very subsistence depends on the government's laws. Therefore, we are nothing but an extended arm of the government as far as these audit services are concerned. And unless those laws are there, we would not have any major work opportunities as such. So that is why you have to always bear in mind. But very prominently, one factor which is observed in our profession is that there is complete lack of unity among ourselves. We always assemble only for academic discussion. We always discuss only the case laws and interpretations, but we never discuss the very important points regarding our own survival, our growth of the profession. And that is why with lack of unity, the society or the clients take undue advantage of that situation. And if you, for any valid reason, if you refuse to sign a balance sheet, the client knows that there are 100 other chartered accountants who will oblige them. That is the reason I always say that even bhajiwalas, sabjiwalas and rickshawalas are also better organized than us, because we never act in a collective manner. We never act in a collective manner, and that is why our voice is never heard. So please, and there again, we are not proactive in the sense that Ranjitji also will agree with me that whenever exposure drafts are published by the institute or by the government also for any proposed amendment or proposed act or proposed bill, we are very few of us really respond to that. We always wake up only when it is already passed, and then we start complaining, "Arey ye theek nahi hai, ye provision aisa nahi chahiye tha." But when they invite your comments, that time very few of us are awake. So that is why my appeal is that you should be always awake. That awakening has to be there. In fact, in the National Defense Academy, where military officers are trained, the messages to those cadets is like this: that be physically fit, mentally awakened, and morally straight. So these are the nothing but the ethical principles. And then we also lack communication skills. All these when I will be linking all these principles when I come to the actual clauses, but the statutory part also have to deal with within about 10 minutes time, then I will go to the schedules. Now, principles of accounting and auditing are also sidelined. That is the observation for all these years, that we are too much obsessed only with tax consideration. हमारे लिए एक ही बात है कि ये टैक्स में ठीक होगा कि नहीं, ITO क्या कहेगा असेसमेंट में, otherwise everything is acceptable to us. And I will share with you very live example of this tax obsession and with reference to various clauses of our schedules also. Friends, there was a very senior firm, a 75-year-old firm, and they were handling the audit of a private limited company for last 25 years. That private limited company consisted of only two shareholders who were brothers of each other. Elder brother was holding 60% shares, younger brother was holding 40% shares. Now, when the due date of filing the return of was say 31st October, the elder brother comes to the office of the chartered accountant and says, hey, my brother is busy with his visa formalities and all. So since the due date is approaching, I will put my signature as the chairman and director of the company. You also put your signature and let the return be filed. Then my brother will come and sign. Now friends, this thing we do in good faith, day in and day out. In good faith, we put our signature, but later on that invites trouble for ourselves. So here what happens is, after 1 week's time, the younger director, he refused to sign the balance sheet and he filed a complaint on 2 counts to the institute against the chartered accountant. What were the 2 counts? These are like really eye-openers for all of us, and those are really nightmarish. The first ground was that under the Companies Act, the balance sheet has to be signed by 2 directors, where in this case, only 1 director had signed. So that is a violation of Companies Act, and therefore the auditor is guilty of misconduct. Now friends, at this juncture, I would like to throw light on the very wrong conception in many of the minds of the professionals, that they are under an impression that once 2 or 3 directors sign a balance sheet, then that's the end of it, then the auditor can easily sign. But friends, the provisions of company law are a little different. What is important under company law is the approval of accounts in the board meeting. Signature of the director is secondary. It is only a consequential. What happens is in the board meeting, the accounts are supposed to be approved, and then the directors authorize 2 or 3 of them to sign on behalf of the board. So this is most important stage. But very few of us are really careful about secretarial record, and we don't verify the secretarial work, the minutes, notices. Even at the time of our own appointment, our institute's guideline is there, that is clause 9 of part 1 of first schedule, that you should verify whether company law formalities have been followed or not. So this, I always insist that you should obtain a certificate from a practicing company secretary that the company secretarial work in this particular aspect about your appointment and all is properly done. But at the same time, it is your duty as well to verify whether the minutes were written, whether the notices were said, whether the meeting was held, whether there is an attendance record. Otherwise, this is very problematic. But most important is that you should always obtain a letter, just as you obtain MRL. In that, you also mention that the accounts were approved by the board in the meeting held on such and such date. See, this always will protect you. So this is one ground. What are the other ground? And friends, I again leave it to your introspection whether you really verify this. The other ground was that one of the cars of the companies was registered only in the name of the other director, and it was not registered in the company's name, and the auditor did not make any comment on this. Now friends, you will wonder, and many people will argue that तो क्या हुआ, तो डायरेक्टर के नाम पे है या पार्टनर के नाम पे है, तो भी कंपनी या फर्म को डेप्रिसिएशन मिलता है इनकम टैक्स में, because there are high court decisions to that effect. But friends, that is why I said we are obsessed only with the tax consideration. It never occurs to us that ultimately when we are certifying the assets to be belonging to that entity, it is our basic duty to verify whether the assets are really standing in the name of that entity. So that is why I say ki don't be too much obsessed only with the tax. But now you will ask me कि इतना सब रिलेशन था, इतना क्लोज और लॉन्ग रिलेशन था, तो उसने कंप्लेंट क्यों किया? तो कंप्लेंट इसलिए किया था कि द डायरेक्टर, यंगर डायरेक्टर had approached the CA firm to with a request to accommodate his daughter as a dummy article, which the firm had refused. Now friends, see, this is the, and therefore as a vengeance, purely to have a vengeance against that particular chartered accountant, the director filed a complaint. So this is what, now for example, there are 3 volumes being published by the institute. Volume 1 is this international international ethical standards which are adapted by our institute now. That is earlier it was called Part A. Volume 2 deals with the Part B. Earlier it was known as Part B. That means the statutory part, the schedules, the pronouncements, guidelines, all those things. And now Volume 3 has come, that is the case law. Now in the reported case laws, you will only find the facts related to that case. But what transpires behind the curtain, that is what I like to share with you, because you don't take anything for granted. As I told you, and almost 90% of the complaints are filed due to the dispute between some third parties, among the partners, among the directors, among the trustees, all, and those are filed, those complaints are filed only to have exert pressure against the other party, and not to basically harass the chartered accountant, but they feel that once you harass the chartered accountant, that means he will exert the pressure on the other side, and chartered accountant is the most soft target. He can be made a scapegoat very easily. And I'll share with you certain instances where a chartered accountant is unnecessarily trapped, whereas other person gets scot free. But so most of the complaints are coming out of such disputes. And now board resolution at section 2.5 of the Companies Act that just now I mentioned, now the new 2013 Act is of course different, section may be different, but the principle is the same, that the balance sheet will be approved by the board in the board meeting. Now two schedules I'll come to, because the 2 schedules basic structure Ranjitji has already covered, the punishments also he has already covered. So I'm not spending time on that. The disciplinary mechanism, section 21 and 22 mainly deal with the basic things about the disciplinary mechanism. Then later on there are procedural sections up to 22G, that is chapter 5 of the Chartered Accountants Act. In fact, about this code of conduct and code of ethics, let me clarify as to why this name was changed in the year 2001. It was a conscious decision. It was not just because of the whims and fancies of somebody. Remember friends, conduct is a very generic term. It could be either good or bad. Whereas ethics essentially denotes something positive. So there is no such thing as good ethics or bad ethics. There is either presence of ethics or there is absence of ethics. That is why in a very conscious way, this positive name was given as code of ethics. And we should also have a positive frame of mind while studying this code of ethics, because those are very essential for our very safety. So I am again and again repeatedly telling you that the code of ethics is for our benefit, it is for our protection, it is to shield us against the possible complaints. So disciplinary mechanism, as far as there are 4 authorities under the Act. One is director discipline. Now director discipline or disciplinary directorate, those are basically bureaucrats. Your complaints are basically processed at that level, director discipline. And then there are of course most of the employees there are chartered accountants or lawyers, and that is the first stage in where the complaint is processed. Then board of discipline handles the first schedule cases, disciplinary committee handles the second schedule cases, and there is appellate authority which is presided over by a high court judge, and there are 4 other members, 2 of which are ex-Central Council members who have completed their full term of Central Council membership. So usually there are 2 past presidents, and then the 2 other parties are the government nominees. So this is appellate authority. I'll deal with the procedural part, and side by side I'll also link it with the schedules. Now there are many important pronouncements like guidelines are there, accounting standards are there, statements are there. So all those things that are regulatory part, and clause 1 of the part 2 of second schedule says that the violation or contravention of any of the council's guidelines also is a misconduct. Now about this communication with the previous auditor, I'll have to give you some other important point, but I'll deal with it when I come to the schedules. Now constitution of board of discipline, disciplinary committee has already been discussed. Now some important principles you should note, because there are normally the reactions of the people when they receive complaint is that that ultimately they counterattack the complainant. But you must remember that our council's focus, or the disciplinary directorate focus, is they have jurisdiction only on individual member of the institute. They don't have jurisdiction on anyone else. They don't have jurisdiction even on the firm of the member, partner of the chartered accountant. They have jurisdiction. The NFRA, NAFRA has jurisdiction over the firm, but council does not have jurisdiction over a firm. So whenever there is a complaint, for example, then firstly they ask, if the complaint is against a firm, they first inquire as to who is the person answerable out of the firm's partners, who is the person answerable for this complaint. Then the firm has to communicate to the institute that such and such partner, such and such manager, or such and such colleague is answerable on this complaint. Then they are treated as the respondent, but the firm as such is not treated as a respondent. But if they don't identify such person, then the proceeding will be against all the partners. So now there are certain important principles which I will quickly go through. The proceedings are initiated on receiving a complaint or even on information. Now information may come to them even from the public domain, public media, that is press media or anything, or mostly the information is received by them from the regulators like MCA or tax departments, revenue authorities, RBI, these are SEBI. These are usually the authorities who keep on sending the things which they come across as a lacuna on the part of the chartered accountants. So they may not prefer a complaint mode. They just pass on the information. I'll share with you a very interesting case here as to how the information is shared by these people, and there all others get scot-free, but the poor chartered accountant has to face a music. And moreover, I'll share, or rather tell such instances where you will not even imagine that this could happen, and that because of this the poor chartered accountant is required to now face the music. Friends, there was a company, executor and trustee companies. They execute the wills of their clients. There was one such executor and trustee company in which they executed a will of a gentleman who obviously expired, and there was a lady, the daughter of that particular deceased person, and she was unhappy. She had a grievance that the execution of will was not proper, and therefore she received less than what she should have received from her father's property. But she wrote many times to the management of the company that they have not executed the will properly. Finally, what she did, since they did not respond, she engaged the services of some other chartered accountant. Now that is another bad part of our profession. Our own chartered accountant friends help the people to harass, or rather to have some complaints against the other chartered accountant. It comes out of rivalry, it comes out of some vengeance. I don't know why, but our chartered accountants are the main people who quite often are instrumental in filing complaint against the chartered accountants. And here I would like to mention that our profession is perceived as a spineless profession. That means we are not assertive. And why we are not assertive? For the various reasons which I told you, but the basic is lack of unity. Now here, that lack of unity is one of the instances that our chartered accountants themselves instigate some other person to file a complaint. And another thing I have observed here, that unfortunately our profession is not that treated as that indispensable, just as the doctors are, just as the lawyers are. So it is not, because in economics we studied one concept, that there is a difference between need and a want. Now society or the country needs chartered accountants, but they don't want the chartered accountants. Why? Because nobody wants to get his accounts audited. Nobody wants to really pay the tax. Therefore, these basic traditional services are rather not very welcome by the people, and these services are taken because only because the law trusts them on the people. And that is why our profession does not command that much of respectability, because they are not treated as indispensable. Now here, first principle, as I told you, it is either starting on a complaint or on information. Then complaint, this is another very important principle. Complainant need not come to the council with clean hands. See, normally in all judicial forums, the complainant or the petitioner has to come before the forum with clean hands. But here, even if the complainant is a confirmed criminal, is convicted, is behind bars, is in jail, even then the council view is that we are not concerned with the conduct of the complainant, we are concerned with the behavior of the respondent member, because they want to ensure and uphold the respectability and the credibility. So they want to merely see whether you have done your job properly or not. You don't tell us that the complainant is a bad person. You tell us that you are a good person and that you have done it properly. So this again and again, you have to keep in mind that the disciplinary mechanism does not regulate or does not adjudicate on anyone's civil rights, or it does not have jurisdiction over any other person other than an individual member of the, because many people say that that other complainant has caused defamation, or he has caused a lot of damage to me, but you have no remedy in the council. You may proceed against him in the other court of law, but not in the council. So that is another thing. So clean hands is not necessary. Like, secondly, the council is also not concerned with the locus standi of the complainant. Locus standi means the complainant may not be even have any connection whatsoever with the matter complained against. He may not have any connection with that company. He may not be a shareholder. He may not be a director. He may not be vendor. He may not be a customer. He may not be anyone to that particular company. Still, a totally stranger also can file a complaint, because the proceedings are treated as quasi-criminal proceedings. So in quasi-criminal proceedings, anybody can complain. Then the withdrawal of complaint is permitted only with the permission of Board of Discipline or the disciplinary committee. So it is not as a matter of right. And the earlier law, because as you know, 2006, there were major amendments in this particular regard in our CA Act. In earlier law, there was no provision for withdrawal of complaint, but now at least the withdrawal is permitted conditionally with a rider that it should be permitted by the Board of Discipline or the disciplinary committee. And the council has jurisdiction basically over only individuals and not members, or not the firms, nor on outsiders. Another next principle is that there is a sort of a time barring, but which is very loose time barring, which is not a very blanket and strict time barring of 7 years, just as we have 6 years in income tax. But this is only when the director is satisfied that it is very difficult to produce evidence, that it is very difficult to explain your defense. But if at all your misconduct is very self-evident, there is no need to go in for any other evidence, then this 7 years does not apply. And I will share with you very interesting case on that. I left that particular story halfway, that executor and trustee company. So that particular lady, sorry for this, now I complete that because this is very interesting and important. That lady engaged a chartered accountant and found out various flaws in the audited accounts. But those flaws were absolutely of technical nature. Some 2-3 accounting standards were not reported on. For example, cash flow statement, AS3 was not reported on, or some other minor things which were not very material as such. It was not affecting the true and fair view of the company as such. But that chartered accountant detected those flaws, so she filed a complaint to the MCA against that company's directors. Now that company's directors were summoned by the ROC, or additional director in the ROC's office, and he understood that those were very frivolous complaint because it was only a technicality, and as such there was nothing great wrong done by the directors in presenting the account. So what he did, he just compounded the offences and fined 5,000 rupees to each director, which they paid, and they were scot-free. Now all were under an impression that now the matter is closed. But unfortunately, friends, ROC as a practice to send all such things to the institute, and the institute then initiates the action on the basis of information against the concerned chartered accountant. So all are scot-free. That lady did not get any justice as such what she wanted, but now unfortunately a chartered accountant is a scapegoat because he is unduly trapped in this. That is why I am saying that be very cautious and particular while discharging your duty religiously. Now here I am on this principle 7 years. There also I will share with you one very interesting case. One chartered accountant signed a will of a particular lady as a witness. The lady died after 10 years after she signed the will. Now When the will was opened, the chartered accountant's signature was there as a witness, but that lady, the testator, had not signed it at all. Now this becomes, this such things happen because we do the things in good faith. We quite often put our own signature and send the things back to the directors for their signature. This is acting in good faith, which will bring you into trouble. That is why I always give a word of caution that because of the disputes, because in the Kali Yuga disputes are bound to take place. So I always recommend strongly that every year you should have one hard copy of balance sheet signed by all the directors or all the partners or all the trustees, all the parts of the management, because ultimately when there are disputes, the disputing party disowns everything. They say that only one or two of us, only one or two directors or partners were interacting with the chartered accountant. We don't know what happened. We were never called in the meeting. The balance sheet was never shown to us. And therefore they disclaim and they say that the chartered accountant was acting in hand in gloves with that other director. So these things are very common, friends. And that is why the documentation, the secretarial record, the confirmatory letters, and the signature of all the persons on the balance sheet is very, very much recommended, very much desirable, so that at least we have the first evidence that all are aware of what the contents of the balance sheet. Now, another thing, even if because of your misconduct some damage has occurred to the other party, the complainant, but you compensate him, even then you cannot be absolved of the misconduct because you cannot undo what has been done. So for example, if it was because of your wrong advice, a client had to pay some interest, tax, penalty, and then you give and compensate for all those losses which he incurred, still you are still liable for misconduct if your advice is proved to be improper and irresponsible. Then next is, even if nobody is aggrieved by your misconduct, even then you are not free or you are not absolved of the misconduct proceeding. Why? For example, the very common case is that you sign the balance sheet of, for example, a charitable trust, which is totally tax-free. But in the process, the income tax officer notices that there are errors in your balance sheet which are in the nature of negligence. Then whether the revenue is affected or not, still the department files complaint. Another example is that based on your balance sheet, for example, if a bank has advanced some loan to someone, then even if there is no NPA, there is no hassle in that loan servicing, everything is smoothly and squared up also, still if there is some basic flaw or negligence in your balance sheet, you still continue to be liable on misconduct. So this is another very important principle that you should you should keep in mind. And there is no time limit per se on the disposal, because that is another, I always call it as indirect punishment. Because indirect punishment means the country, normally once a complaint is filed, it takes at least 3 to 4 years for the completion of the case. So I have one another slide for the indirect punishment. Broad procedure is that there is a complaint which is received. The complaint is forwarded to the respondent. The respondent then is expected to write a written statement, which is within 21 days. But our chartered accountants always wake up at the 11th hour. So there is a provision for them that there can be maximum 30 days extension of time, because we never work without extension of time. That is very bad quality of our chartered accountant. So within 30 days, next 30 days, you have to file a complaint. Remember that your reply should be very objectively drafted. It should be point by point giving your answers, how did you discharge your duties. There is no sense or no point in counter attacking the complainant. Many people say that वो complainant ही बदमाश है, तो उसके against वो complaint का attack करते हैं. But council is not interested in knowing whether the complainant is a good person or bad person. I am repeating that they are interested in knowing only if you have done something wrong or improper. So please remember that your objective, it should be very objectively drafted. All the points which are in your favor, you should put it in the that particular written statement, because you don't get second opportunity. This is very important point, because many consultants or lawyers, they advise that, why should we open all our cards at this stage? But remember that there is no occasion for you to open other cards, because what happens is your reply is sent to the complainant. The complainant writes a rejoinder to it. Once all these 3 documents are before the director discipline, that means your complaint, the written statement, and the rejoinder, then they verify, they start scrutinizing, and in the process of scrutiny, they require many further document or information. They write to either of the parties and get that document. Once that is done, then the director forms what is called as a prima facie opinion. Once that prima facie opinion is formed, suppose there are 8 allegations. In 8 allegations, he may see that 5 you are not prima facie guilty, but in 3 you are prima facie guilty. So he puts that before the board of discipline or the disciplinary committee, depending on whether it is schedule 1 or schedule 2. If it is a mixed one, he puts it before the disciplinary committee. Now, the disciplinary committee or the board of discipline may either agree or disagree or partly agree with the views of the director discipline. So they may say that no, instead of 5, on 6 he is not guilty, or the other way around. On 4 only he is not guilty, on remaining 4 he is guilty. Prima facie. This I am emphasizing the word prima facie. Once you are prima facie guilty, then there is actually hearing that takes place. In the hearing, suppose you are not prima facie guilty at all, then they close the file. But if you are held guilty on even one count, prima facie guilty, then there is a hearing. Hearing may be before the BOD or the disciplinary committee. Both you are allowed to be represented by counsel. That is, a complainant also comes and a respondent also comes, and there is a proper hearing, which is a fact-finding inquiry. Once that is done, the disciplinary committee or the board of discipline, they issue a report. In that report, they draw findings and conclusions whether you are guilty or not. Once you are held guilty, then you are given one more opportunity as to what punishment should be awarded to you. Now, that in that particular hearing, the no counsel is permitted. Only you have to go alone, and you have to plead as to why there should be mildest possible punishment, reprimand, fine, whatever. Once that is done, then an order is passed, and that order is appealable within 90 days before the appellate authority. So to recapitulate, there is a complaint, written statement, then rejoinder, then prima facie opinion, thereafter hearing के बाद report आता है, report के बाद punishment आता है, that is this order, and that order is appealable. So this is the procedural part. Now, punishments part already has been done, but indirect punishments are also very serious. Indirect punishments is that once you are held guilty, then you are deprived of the audits for next 3 to 5 years in respect of audits of RBI or banking, PSUs or CNAG. As you are aware, under the Companies Act also, you have to now give a declaration every year that whether you have been, any of your partners has been held guilty, or whether there are any proceedings in progress against any of the partners against the misconduct proceeding. So this declaration you have to give for your appointment of every corporate. Fortunately, it has not come for the non-corporate entities, but there also that means you have to make a disclosure whether there is pending case. Now, after the prima facie opinion is formed and it is communicated to you, then you say that your case is pending before the disciplinary committee. Eligibility to train articles is lost. For example, suppose you are 20 years in practice, but now you are held guilty. Then, after suppose your membership is suspended for 1 month, you are restored. Membership is restored, but then you are back to square one. That means that is the first day of your practice. That means you are 0. Your number of seniority is 0 years, and you don't get any eligibility for the government audits, nor you can train the articles. And then it is a stigma, of course. It is always biting your conscience that you are held guilty. Who complains? That is also interesting to know. Normally, the clients, the financial institutions, banks, lenders, investors, all the users of your services, regulatory authorities, staff members, article trainees, co-professionals, total strangers, then members against their own partners also complain. Complaints may be filed out of ego clashes, rivalry, and as the arm twisting measure, and existence of professional blackmailers is also there. There are many people who just blackmail you by finding flaws in the balance sheets signed by you. Now, again with one particular incident, I will explain one principle of clause 11 of part 1 of first schedule. Now, friends, as you know, I have come across many chartered accountants who are doing some business in a private limited company in which only themselves and their spouses are directors and shareholders. So there is no third director. Now, as was mentioned by Ranjitji, when you are signing the ROC forms now will amount to your active participation in the management of the company. There is clause 11, schedule 1, part 1 of schedule 1, which says that a chartered accountant cannot be engaged in any other business or occupation without the specific permission of the council. And there are in regulation 190A, there are some blanket permissions given for certain activities, but otherwise you have to obtain the permission. Now, in one particular case, A was a chartered accountant, B was an engineer, and both were very close friends. Now A was actually in full time into that business, but he had maintained his COP just like that, just for the sentimental reasons. B's son wanted to do articles, and which he did it under Mr. A. Now he passed. Thereafter, as I told you, in the Kali Yuga, the disputes are bound to be there. So A and B, there was a serious dispute. There was a lot of litigation. And in that litigation, just to harass Mr. A, B's son, who had done his articles under A, filed a complaint against Mr. A, saying that he was doing the business without obtaining the permission of the council. Now, Mr. A said, who was a chartered accountant, he said he has no defense at all because he was executive director, he was fully into the business, and he had not obtained permission, so he had no defense. He had to surrender. Question is, ultimately the disciplinary committee had to punish him, but then they reprimanded that student. They said it is not in good taste that you are filing a complaint against your own principal. But things are gone to that extent. Now, the other exposures are that people directly approach the police now, and the many chartered accountants are unnecessarily then imprisoned also, and then for 3-4 days, then they are released on bail. Then the press, there is a defamation. Their consumer forum also they approach. Now, most of the clauses in the course of our discussion have already been covered. I will come to Schedule 1. Part 1 is applicable to the members in practice. There it is paying the share commission broker. Clause 2 I am on because 2, 3, 4 are more relevant. He accepts the profits of a person, not a member of the person. He shares the fees or enters into partnership, but the multiplicity partnership, as Mr. Ranjit ji mentioned. So those are the exceptions. Otherwise, you cannot share your fees with a non-member. Then secures work who is not through a person who is not an employee or a partner. But remember, you can secure work from another chartered accountant. But there should not be any advertisement or circular. That is next clause 6. Solicits work. You are free to solicit work from another chartered accountant, but not through circular advertisement, etc. It could be a personal communication. You can meet him or you can request him, but there should not be which is in the nature of advertisement. Advertisement means you are giving prominence to yourself, your firm name, your achievements. That is advertisement. Then advertises his professional services. Now, even for the chartered accountants who are doing coaching classes, their institute has issued a guideline that they should not unduly publicize through the medium of hoardings or other brochures or other things that they are connected with that particular coaching class and they are practicing chartered accountant. So also your firm name should never be projected. Then even when you are writing articles in the press, you are writing articles in the magazine, or you are giving lectures, your firm name may be mentioned but should not be projected. Then now accepts work without communicating with the previous auditor. Now here 1 or 2 additional points I would like to mention, that this is particularly only to protect our own interest. And remember, there is nowhere mention of no objection certificate or NOC, although we loosely call it as NOC. What is required is communication in writing with the previous auditor. But previous auditor, who is the previous auditor? The person who held that position last. For example, there was a tax audit of a particular entity 4 years ago. In between 2 years, there was no tax audit. Now again that entity has to be tax audited. Then the person who was there 4 years ago, you have to communicate with him. Remember, the communication is required in respect of all kinds of audit, like the internal audit, concurrent audit, stock audit, revenue audit, whatever name you give, you have to communicate. Even if you are appointed by a government agency, even then the communication is required. That is very important. Now you can do it on email. But another important factor here is that there is a guideline which says there is a notification of the institute which says that if there are any undisputed audit fees unpaid of the previous auditor, and if you accept the work, then that is also a misconduct. The only exception is that 6 units. But here you have to be very careful that the undisputed audit fees have been defined. Undisputed audit fees means the audit fees appearing as outstanding in the balance sheet, which has been signed by the auditee, that means directors or partners as the case may be. Now people will ask, what about the cash method of accounting and all? So there are many ways of verifying whether the undisputed audit fees have been paid. But the protection is given only to audit fees and not professional fees. Now many times what happens is, if there is a mixed invoicing, and if the client says that he has paid the fees, but the previous auditor may say that he has appropriated it against the other fees, and the audit fees still remain outstanding. So you have to be very careful and verifying. Don't take anything for granted. Don't take that professional skepticism or good faith, what I say. Don't accept the client's word at face value. You verify yourself whether the fees have been paid. Otherwise, in your letter addressed to the previous auditor, you please mention that, please let us know whether any of your undisputed audit fees have been unpaid. So this is very, very important point which you should do. In fact, I always wonder, even our institute had to issue a notification that even non-maintenance of accounting records of by a chartered accountant is a misconduct. Now, friend, this is really disgraceful to all of us. You only introspect as to how many SME firms really maintain their own accounts on a day-to-day regular basis. But we only curse the clients. We only give bad words to the clients, saying that they are all disorganized, they don't know everything. सब हमको ही करना पड़ता है. Now this is the reality. Except then the professional assignment who is based on the percentage of profit or the result of your work. So that is also which is very commonly known. Engages in any other business or occupation. The only exception provided in that particular clause is that you can be a director of a limited company, but you have to be director simpliciter. That means you cannot take active part in the business. So you should not, as far as possible, sign any document like your contracts or your checks or the correspondence or the invoices. You should refrain from signing anything. You can only attend the board meetings, take sitting fees. You should not draw any remuneration. So these are the things which go with the engages in any other business or occupation. And many of times where only two, the husband and wife are the directors, it is always advisable to have some third or fourth director in that to do the compliances. Because even signing the balance sheet, even signing the checks is considered as your active participation in the business. So this is very important. Many people are doing share trading. So that is also not permitted. It is, as a business, you cannot do it. Or allow is a person who not in his name, person who is a member. So that is okay, not very material. Second, part 2 is applicable to the members in service. That means they should not divulge the secrets, or they cannot share the remuneration of the other person. So these are not very material for members in practice directly. Then part 3 is also not very important as such. The giving wrong information, false information, वगैरह. Part 4 is important. Part 4, if you are held guilty under any other civil or criminal law by a court where the punishment is less than 6 months imprisonment, this falls under Schedule 1. But if the punishment prescribed for that particular crime where you are convicted is more than 6 months, then it falls under the second schedule. So first schedule is if where the imprisonment is less than 6 months. Now, and the last clause is brings disrepute to the profession. See, your behavior is unbecoming of a professional. In this, even there are dowry cases. Even then there are traffic offences. If you are traveling without ticket, or if you misbehave, all these things are covered. Or if you have issued a check which is getting bounced, now even that also, for technical reasons, if it is bounced, okay. But otherwise, if you issue a check which is bouncing, that is also covered under this, because it brings disrepute to the profession. And remember, friends, the press also gives bad publicity. The headlines are like this: chartered accountant held guilty for such and such things. So this again brings bad publicity to the profession, and the council is very, very particular and sensitive about it, because ultimately it affects the entire profession. So you should also be very careful about this, and because ultimately the interests of all the professionals are concerned. Part 1 of second schedule is normally clause 4 is important. First 3 are self-explanatory, but part 4, clause 4 is more important. We say that if you sign the financial statements of an entity or a business, where yourself or your firm or any partner has substantial interest, and there is a guideline of the institute, which all the guidelines were issued on 8th of August 2008. And in that, the chapter 4, that guideline says that if your relatives are also having substantial, because that is not there in the clause, but in the guideline, even the relatives are covered. If you have substantial interest in that entity, like holding 20%, then you are not allowed to certify the financial statement. Earlier, before amendment, the clause was that there was exception provided. And if you make a disclosure that the auditee entity is a relative person, then that was permissible. But now it is not permissible. So you have to be very careful. Fails to disclose. Now these 5, 6, 7, 8 clauses are going parallel. It is the non-disclosure of a material fact. In one particular case, there was a charitable trust in which there were 16 bank accounts. 5 bank accounts were inoperative. But inoperative in the sense that trustees said that it is inoperative. But those statements were not available. The chartered accountant accepted it in good faith. But he did not make a comment that there was no bank statement available, therefore bank accounts were not reconciled to that. This remark was necessary. He came in trouble, although this was only a technical default. So remember that disclosure which is material has to be there. Fails to report a material misstatement. Suppose there is a wrong statement in the balance sheet, that has to be reported. The 7th clause is the most important and the dangerous one. Because ultimately, all these other parts result into this. Does not exercise due diligence or is grossly negligent. Now friends, so far we had a shelter that auditor is only a watchdog and not a bloodhound. But that principle now is no longer acceptable. The society and the regulators expect that we should act like bloodhounds only, not merely watchdogs, and therefore that calls for due diligence. Many people are held guilty because if with some more due diligence, greater frauds would have been exposed. So this is very important that there will be, earlier only gross negligence was there, but now they have added due diligence. Friends, many times what happens is our SA 700, 705, if at all our people lack courage. In fact, our profession, there is a crisis of courage. So we cannot put our foot down, we are not assertive, and we don't say that we will not tolerate this, and therefore we are afraid of giving a qualified report saying that this does not show true and fair view. But our SA 700 rather requires that you should have that courage, or if at all you are not comfortable with the records, you have the courage and boldness to say that we are unable to express the opinion. But on this count, there are many such complaints, particularly of credit cooperative societies or particularly under the IBC, where the accounts are in doldrum, accounts are not proper, then the data is not available, then you should always write that we are unable to express the opinion. Don't give lot of adverse remarks and then say it is true and fair subject to this. This is wrong. So you have to be very careful on this. Fails to obtain sufficient information, fails to invite attention. Now these are all self-explanatory. Clause 10 is important. Fails to keep monies of client other than the money meant for to be spent. For example, he has given you for tax payment or for company formation expenses. But if you are giving the money, the client says that I am a non-resident, I am depositing some amount with you, please go on releasing part by part to my parents who are old parents here, or please go on releasing the installments of some investment or some flat which I have purchased, then that money you cannot hold in your own account. It has to be in separate account. You cannot make a fixed deposit and enjoy interest for yourself. Second schedule, now the first clause is contravenes any of the provisions of this act or regulations. All these guidelines, pronouncements, all these come here. Being employee of the company, firm or person discloses confidential information. This is permitted only when with the consent of the client or when the other law, there is an obligation on you. There is a requirement of some law that you should disclose. Then inputs into wrong information, defalcates and embezzles. Unfortunately, friends, I have come across cases where there were many CFOs or financial executives of some companies who were chartered accountants, and they were involved in defalcation and embezzlement of money. So these are the usually part 3, as I told you, only one clause where if you are held guilty under any other law, a criminal or civil law, and where the punishment is more than 6 months imprisonment, then it falls here. So friends, this is what the brief discussion of the entire statutory provisions, procedure, schedule 1 and 2, and the broad the philosophical part. I thank Mr. Sandeep Sharma, Mr. Durgadas ji for their wonderful opportunity for sharing these things with you, and also Ranjit ji, who has been generous enough always to allow me to share dais with him and rather his presentation was very enlightening to all of us. So I thank and I wish you all the best for your future in your professional as well as your personal lives. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Very wonderful presentation in a very simple words. बहुत ही बढ़िया लगा सर. It's well accepted by all. Even जो हमारे participant हैं, they are appreciating a lot. Sir, we have few questions in Q&A section from our participant. तो फटाफट हम इसको कर लेते हैं because we have to leave close at 6 o'clock. Sir, I am reading or you will take one by one. Ranjit sir. Sir, आप please unmute कर लीजिए.
You can take one by one, no issue.
है ना? First question was from Chandar Kumar Thakur ji. A statutory auditor can do MCA work. Can a statutory auditor do MCA work of such company like filing of AOC 4, MGT 7, KYC?
Yes, yes. Now, after this new code of ethics, we have allowed this routine work, which are routine in nature, can be done by our statutory auditor, ROC, income tax, GST, all these filing you can do with the consent of the client.
Next question is from Asha Kumari ji. She's asking if we have signed copy of balance sheet and profit and loss printed from Tally software with BOD later that account are approved, will it be sufficient or balance sheet PL need to be as per revised schedule 3 format only?
Normally it has to be in revised schedule 3, but Vijay sir will enlighten us if because Tally printed balance sheet with the, if it has been approved in the BOD, that can be a conclusive evidence. But let's share the Vijay sir view in this regard also.
Vijay sir.
I think he has left.
I think there is some issue. No issue.
Next.
We'll go into the next question by Ruchir Desai. For how many years the audit related documentation need to be preserved?
Right now, 6 years.
Our next question is from Monica Manchanda ji. Can member in a practice take agency point of sale of any type of insurance like life, medical?
No. Any type of agency or life insurance or general insurance is not permitted to chartered accountant.
Now Vijay sir is with us. Sir, there is one question from Asha Kumari. If we take signed copy of balance sheet and PL, printed from Tally software with BOD later that account are approved.
Same question was tackled. I answered that. If it has to be in schedule, prescribed schedule.
Okay.
But this about the preservation of books, I would like to supplement that since the complaint can be filed within 7 years from the date of signing of the balance sheet, then accordingly you have to preserve the record to that extent. But this previous question, I already answered that there cannot be a violation of the Companies Act.
Right.
So, one question is from Manisha Gupta. Can a CA holding COP buy and sell shares on regular basis?
No, it should not be in the nature of trading. If it is done purely as an investment, and as you know, the criteria for treating it as investment vis-a-vis trading, because we have many cases under income tax also.
Right.
So there should not be getting character of a trading or a business deal. Buying and yes, but the frequency, the number of transactions, all those will count. Especially it is speculative. That means without taking delivery, if it is done, then there is certainly a trouble.
Yeah. Sir, one question is from Sunil ji. He is asking, in limited tenders, firms are quoting below cost and are getting the assignment allotted. How this can be challenged through code of ethics?
So that is why this number one, those quotation tender where minimum fees is there, you cannot quote below that. If you are quoting below that, then if it is brought to our notice, disciplinary proceeding already we can start. Even just to inform you, till date, after the notification of this tender guideline, more than 22 disciplinary proceeding already under process for quoting below than the minimum price by the chartered accountant. So if you bring these points to our notice, initiation will be start. But that's why we regulator were also quoting very low fees. So we have changed the line commensurate with the audit work is required now. So both the aspect we have covered.
Sir, next question is one of employee CA who is an employee in a company is appointed as director of that company. Should he take permission from institute, or he can be appointed as a director of the company?
For a non-executive director or independent director, if you want to be, no permission of ICA is required.
Sir, he is an employee director.
No, but it's only if the question. Shall I answer?
Yes,
Shall
sir,
I
yes.
answer?
Yes, sir,
The
yes.
question will arise only if he is holding COP. If he is not holding COP, then
He is not holding COP.
Then
he
not required.
can do whatever he like.
He is
So,
right.
but holding COP, then even for the employment, he has to seek permission.
Correct, sir. Sir, one CA is neither doing any practice nor doing any job. He is in a business. A business in a partnership with some non-CAs.
No issue.
Since this is a COVID time, and you know the business situation, he wanted to convert or explore the CA profession as well. Can he do so?
He cannot do it simultaneously. He has to give up all his business connections and come with on clean slate. That means he has to retire from partnership. He has to surrender his directorship, all those things, and then apply fresh on a clean slate for CO. Then it is possible.
Okay. Sir. Thank you, sir. That's all. I think these were the questions we have. Now I would like to ask Durgadas ji, sir, you have something?
सर, आज का जो सेमिनार रहा, जो डिस्कशन रहा, बहुत ही शानदार. मैंने वाजे साहब को सुना, पूरा गौर से सुना 2 घंटे.
बहुत बढ़िया.
रंजीत जी को भी, और वंडरफुल. As we know, peoples know, our profession is noble profession.
Yes.
और उसमें हमारा बहुत बड़ा योगदान है, लेकिन जो कुछ कमियां हैं उन्होंने बड़े साफ शब्दों में वाजे साहब ने बोला कि जब एक्सपोजर ड्राफ्ट आते हैं, किसी हमारे इंस्टीट्यूट से आते हैं, हमारे गवर्नमेंट से आते हैं, कहीं से आते हैं, तो वी आर रिलक्टेंट टू इवन बॉदर टू सी इट. और जब वो पास हो जाता है, एक्ट बन जाता है, फिर हम कहते हैं ह्यू एंड क्राई कि ये गलत कर दिया, ये गलत कर दिया, ये गलत कर दिया. तो वी आर प्रोफेशनल्स, वी शुड लर्न इट, वी शुड सी इट एंड वी शुड कमेंट इट. ये मत सोचें कि वो गलत है, सही है. हमको रेस्पॉन्ड करना चाहिए. नंबर 1 मैंने एक बात सीखी सर से. दूसरा बोल रहे थे कि जो कंप्लेंट होती है वो किसी ना किसी जानकार से ही होती है. तो हम जो फेथ में हम जो है भाई प्रो क्लाइंट्स के लिए होते हैं, लेकिन इतना भी ना करें कि जो छोटी सी बात पे हमें 4 साल 6 साल बाद हमको किसी लपेट में हम आ जाएं. तो वी मस्ट बी केयरफुल इन दैट. तीसरा जो बहुत बड़ा जो बात है कि भाई वो सीए बाहर चला गया है, तुम साइन कर दो, ये कर दो, हम बाद में दे देंगे एनओसी वगैरह, ये सारा इन चीजों में बातों में नहीं आए. हम क्लियर रहें तो हम काफी कुछ ठीक रह सकते हैं. और एक श्लोक मेरे को याद आ रहा है कि जैसे नोबल प्रोफेशन मैंने बोला, तो श्रेष्ठ पुरुष की परिभाषा भगवान ने कही थी, यत यत आचरति श्रेष्ठ है तत् तत् वितर्जन है, सह यत प्रमाणम कुरुते लोकस्ततनु वर्तते. जैसा जैसा श्रेष्ठ पुरुष आचरण करते हैं, वैसा वैसा ही दूसरे लोग करने लग जाते हैं, क्योंकि वह जो कुछ प्रमाण कर देता है, सारा मनुष्य समुदाय उसी के अनुसार बढ़ते लग जाता है. तो हम अपने आप को पहचाने, हमारा बिहेवियर, हमारा कंडक्ट नॉट ओनली इन प्रोफेशनल, एक समाज में भी हमारा इस तरह का होना चाहिए जिससे कि हम एग्जाम्पल बने. करें, सबकी मदद करें, लेकिन कहीं झांसे में नहीं आए, और वी मस्ट बी केयरफुल. मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा आज का प्रोग्राम. रंजीत जी हमारे साथ रहे, उन्होंने बताया, बैकग्राउंड बता दी, और उन्होंने जो प्रेजेंटेशन वाजे साहब का था, बड़ा एकदम क्लियर कट. अपना जो केस स्टडीज देते ना, बस 2 भाइयों की डायरेक्टरशिप में इशू कुछ और होता है, कंप्लेंट कहीं और हो जाती है. तो बहुत ही वंडरफुल. मैं आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करना चाहूंगा वाजे साहब, और रंजीत जी आपका भी. एंड जो पार्टिसिपेंट हैं, बड़ा इंटरेक्टिव रखा, सारे क्वेश्चंस का आंसर भी हो गया, और बड़े मतलब टाइम से, मतलब हम 6:02 हम एक्सीड कर गए हैं। तो इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ सबको बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। वजह साहब बहुत बहुत थैंक यू वेरी मच।
थैंक यू सर।
Thank you so much, sir. So we ended that meeting.
Yeah.
Yes.
थैंक यू।
Okay, sir. Nice to be
Thank-
with you, sir.